Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Explicitly Pro-Life. I'm Kristin Hawkins. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. All right, so today I wanted to air an episode of my pro-life training under quarantine Facebook series. This is actually the last one. I've just finished recording today with Billy Valentine, Vice President of Governmental Affairs at the Susan B. Anthony List, and Mary Kate Knorr, the Executive Director of Illinois Right to Life. We just had a conversation, and I really want you to listen to this because I think you'll get a lot out of it, talking about why elections matter. And as you all know, the campaign has kind of been stalled because of the corona crisis. But as you all know, it's not going to be stalled forever. It's certainly going to be heating up in the coming months. And we're going to be hearing, I know as a pro-life activist, I often hear from pro-lifers, why should I be involved in politics? Nothing ever changes. We win an election and then we lose an election, or we get something passed and then that, gets changed. And I think there's a lot of excuses we hear sometimes as to why pro-lifers shouldn't be involved in politics. And we kind of dismantle some of those myths. We also are going to be talking about why this election matters and why it's the most important in the pro-life movement's history. And I know sometimes people say, well, you always say that this election is the most important election. This election really is. There's so much on the line. And what we've been building towards in the pro-life generation and Students for Life is this post-Roe society, this nation where there is no Roe versus Wade, where the decision of abortion goes back to the states. Guess what? That is all on the line in 2020. Whether or not we can achieve that, possibly in my lifetime, will depend upon the outcome of this election. That is how critical this election is. So I think you're going to really enjoy hearing this conversation between Mary Kate and Billy and myself. What's also awesome is Billy is a Students for Life alum. Both Billy, Mary Kate, and myself were all in our early 30s, younger leaders in the pro-life movement. If you don't know who Billy and Mary Kate are, you definitely should, because these are up and coming movers and shakers in the pro-life movement who are making incredible strides. So I hope you'll listen in and enjoy this conversation, and make sure you subscribe to my podcast and tell your friends to subscribe. We have some really exciting changes coming that I want to tell you about, but I can't tell you about, but it's coming soon. So make sure you're tuning in and catching every episode. All the new episodes, as you all know, come out on Thursdays. So enjoy this conversation. Hi everyone, it's Kristin Hawkins, and welcome to my fifth and final pro-life training under quarantine Facebook Live. Tonight we're going to talk about how you can engage in the 2020 elections. This is a very, very important topic. So I actually have two good friends on tonight who are going to be sharing some of their pro-life political expertise. Billy Valentine of the Susan B. Anthony List and Mary Kate Knorr from Illinois Right to Life. I want to thank lifenews.com for partnering with us on this series. This is so important right now, especially while many of us are at home, we're quarantined. This is not the time to slow down our pro-life activism. We know this is a time, actually, we need to ramp up our pro-life activism. It's a time we need to continue to talk about why abortion is wrong for not only children, obviously, but also women, and why our state legislatures, why our governors, why our elected officials in Washington, D.C. should be standing on the right side of history. Thankfully, we have 10 states that have already blocked abortion funding, including Ohio, Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, Iowa, Indiana, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Tennessee right now. So during the COVID crisis, their state governors have said that, abortion really isn't essential, and abortion facilities shouldn't be operating during this crisis. They shouldn't be wasting precious PPE, personal protective equipment, and that equipment should be going to hospitals. And so we're so thankful for those state leaders, but we also know we have a lot of states like New York, states like Connecticut and California, who continue to allow abortion facilities to operate. Here in my state of Pennsylvania, for example, the Planned Parenthoods have ceased doing all services except one. And I bet you can guess what that one service is. In fact, they even sent a fundraising email asking for Pennsylvanians to donate personal protective equipment to their abortion facilities so they can remain operating and remain committing abortions every single day. So they aren't ceasing. The abortion industry isn't stopping. And we know that November 2020 is going to be extremely important for the future of our pro-life movement because so much is at stake. So I hope you'll tune in tonight and stay with us. And if you've got questions, make sure you put the questions down below, and I'll get to them towards the end and ask Billy and Mary Kate their expertise. After the training today, make sure you check out a couple of our kind of quarantine pro-life activism resources. You can access our Ask a Pro-Lifer website. So you can go on this site and ask any question you have about abortion. Refer your pro-choice friends. It's called Ask a Pro-Lifer, askaprolifer.com. You can also head over to studentsforlifehq.com and get all of our free training and resources, things that you can do now and start planning for next school year. And then also head over to talk.studentsforlifehq, where you can sign up and pledge to have conversations. Students for Life is having conversations right now online. And we're also continuing to train young people, this pro-life generation, about what they can do now and after we leave our homes and we leave quarantine. In fact, I just found out today that the Students for Life team has been able to train over 2,000 young people in the past month in how to start, launch, and continue to grow Students for Life groups on college and high school campuses. So now we're going to talk about the elections. And I know some of you don't like politics. I've heard it before. Politics is dirty. I wish we didn't have to do with politics. Politics, Kristin, this is a human rights issue. This isn't a political issue. Duh, we all agree on that. However, we know that engaging in politics is one area that we have to engage in the pro-life movement, just like how we have to be in front of the abortion facility style counseling, just like how we have to be inside in the Pregnancy Resource Center, just like how we have to be on college and high school campuses. We have to be everywhere the abortion industry is. And guess what? They're on Capitol Hill. They're in your state legislature. So I'm really excited to introduce our two guests. Billy Valentine is the Vice President for Public Policy at the Susan B. Anthony List. He manages the organization's governmental affairs team and programs. On the political end, Billy helps manage the organization's candidate fund, overseeing the process for endorsing candidates and prioritizing the organization's involvement in federal and state races. If you ask Billy about any race going on in the United States, he knows it. It's crazy. It's like an encyclopedia. Also, what's not mentioned in the bio, and probably the most important thing, is Billy was a leader in Students for Life when he was a student at Franciscan University. So I've known Billy a long time, and he ages me. Mary Kate Knorr. Mary Kate is the Executive Director of Illinois Right to Life. She's been in that position since March of 2018. Her current role, she works as the Operative and Communications Advisor on numerous state and federal political campaigns. In less than 2 years, Mary Kate has spoken before thousands on the need for abortion restrictions in Illinois. And to be honest with you, we all know Illinois is a hot mess, and I can't think of any better leader to have in Illinois leading the pro-life movement right now than Mary Kate. So Billy, Mary Kate, welcome.
Thanks so much, Kristin.
Thanks for getting on tonight. I've got some hard questions and easy questions. So, Billy, I wanted to start with you. Could you give us kind of a lay of the land for what's at stake at 2020 and what we're facing and what we're looking at?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to, Kristin. I think what I'll do, I'll give you kind of a 10,000 foot view of what the landscape looks like for 2020. And we'll start with the most fun one, which is getting the most attention. That's, of course, the presidential election. And I think we'll start here. Donald Trump is the most pro-life president we've ever had in our nation. You look at his courage in defunding Planned Parenthood, finally, of Title X funding. That's $60 million a year. That is something where, Planned Parenthood had been getting Title X funding for 49 years. And it took electing Donald Trump to finally defund them of that funding. And then you look at the Mexico City policy. Not only did he reinstate it, he reinstated what Reagan had done and what Bush had done, but he made it even more effective. He expanded it. So now not only does the Mexico City Fund apply to millions of dollars, it actually applies to billions of dollars in foreign aid to ensure our tax dollars aren't funding abortions overseas. And then just another example, you think back to January, how exciting it was when he became the first ever sitting president to speak at the March for Life in an election year. that told me he not only stands with us on the issue, but he believes in the political power of our movement and that life is a winning issue. And that's, of course, why we're all on this call together tonight. But there's one thing that I think is the most important thing he's done by far for the movement, and that is judges.
Right.
You start with the Supreme Court. You got Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh. That is because we elected this president. But then you look at the lower courts, 189 lower court judges confirmed under President Trump. That's transformative. These are judges, some are in their late 30s, some are in their 40s. This is a decades-long transformation. And why do I say that the judiciary is most important and President Trump's impact on judges? It's because due to Roe versus Wade and due to Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the court has tied the hands of the American people. It's taken the issue out of the public square, and it's only the court that can untie our hands. That's why judges are so important. So let's look at where we are now. We're at 5-4. We've got a slim majority on the Supreme Court. I think we can make some progress with that. But if we really want to erode and possibly even overturn Roe, I think we're going to need more. And we know whoever wins in November is likely to fill at least 1 to 2, maybe more vacancies in the first 4 years of their presidency. So that's why the presidential race, I think, is so important from a pro-life movement perspective. And that brings us to the Senate, because while it's the president that nominates judges, it's the Senate that confirms them. Right now, we have a very slim pro-life majority in the Senate. It's 53-47. When you look at the map this November on the Senate side, it's pretty daunting. You have 33 Senate seats up. Out of those 33, Republicans are defending 23 of them. Then you dig down a little bit further. You say, okay, what races are competitive? Out of the competitive races, I'd say there's 10 of them. Republicans are defending 8 of those seats. Democrats are defending 2 of them. So our pro-life Senate majority is truly in play. And think about this. If you lose the presidency or you lose the Senate, we're done with judges. We've really got to retain both. And that's why at Susan B. Anthony List, we prioritize the presidential race. We prioritize key Senate races because of how critical judges are for finally untying the hands of the American people. So then you look at the House. Of course, it's currently run by Nancy Pelosi, no friend of the unborn. We certainly need to win back the House. I think the pathway to doing that is definitely difficult. It's not impossible. I think a lot of primaries are still playing out. I think the presidential and Senate races will really drive which direction House races go into. We need to fight on that ground, but again, I think presidential and Senate, from a strategic perspective for this election cycle, are most important. When you look at statewide races, there's only really 2 very competitive governor's races. Those are in Montana and North Carolina. Most governor's races are going to be in 2022, but those are 2 very important states where we're going to need to fight. And then, of course, you have down ballot races from there. So we don't have enough time tonight to really dive into specifics from there, but I would really encourage everybody, go to Cook Political Report.
That's right.
Go to ratings. That's where you can see where all the competitive races are. What are the competitive states from a presidential perspective, the Electoral College? Where are the competitive Senate races? Where are the competitive House races? And so on. That's where you can get caught up to speed very quickly. That's Cook Political Report. The other thing I wanted to say is how excited we are to partner with Students for Life of America as it relates to our field program.
You mean Students for Life Action, right?
That's right. Students for Life Action. That's correct.
That's right.
We are currently hiring right now in Arizona, Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Montana, and Texas. This is great. Full-time work for those that need it, part-time work, summer job when you're home from school. And we're even paying pro-life clubs to do deployments as well. So Ella Witt is on this call. I know she joined us tonight. You can find her on Facebook. Again, her name is Ella Witt, and her email is ella@sbalesfield.org. And finally, as Kristin said, I got to know her when I was in college. And it was really just when Kristin had come on board and Students for Life was starting to build out a staff. It used to be a student-run operation. And, at that time, it's when SBA List was just kind of starting to do field work politically. I would have loved to have been a college student. I could have easily just gotten plugged into this kind of work. So students, you have it made. You can not only make a difference, but you can even also make money through this, which we all know college students are poor and you need it. So all you got to do is say yes, and we'll sign you up.
And that's right. Thank you, Billy. We're really excited about this partnership. Sometimes I hear in the pro-life movement, people say, oh, the pro-life movement's so divided. There's all these different groups. It's really not that way. In fact, what we're doing with Susan B. Anthony and Students for Life Action proves that we are actually on the same team, and we're working together, and we're doing this in a strategic way. And in fact, if you want to go to studentsforlifeaction.org, you click the Get Involved link at the top of the menu. There's a drop-down box, and you choose Join the Call or Door Squad. And all you have to do is sign up. It takes like 10 seconds. And we'll plug you in with Ella over at SBA List, Titus at the Students for Life Action team, and we'll give you opportunities to start making phone calls now. In fact, Students for Life leaders were on the phones last week with Susan B. Anthony List calling into the state of Arizona. You can sign up to do a door deployment. So SBA List is going to help pay for your travel. We'll actually pay you to knock on doors for weekends in the fall and even starting this summer. And Students for Life actually has a lot of door opportunities in other states for down ballot state legislative races. So there's a lot of opportunities for you. And this is for pro-lifers of all ages as well. So just go to studentsforlifeaction.org, click Get Involved, and click Join Door or Call Squad. It takes 10 seconds. We'll get you in the loop. We'll get you trained. And hopefully we'll get you paid to save babies. So that's like the best thing, right? You can save lives and make a huge difference, and also hopefully maybe pay for your books next semester. Or I was talking to some students, I was like, you don't need a part-time job, just knock on doors for a whole month of October and you're done. So Billy, you brought up a good point about you being a student and getting involved and would have liked to have this opportunity. I wanted Mary Kate, if you could talk a little bit about what you think are some of the best ways for students to get involved in the upcoming elections, or how can they get plugged in at the local level?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, I'm obviously with Illinois Right to Life right now, but my background is in political campaigns. So when I was in college, I was a student. I wasn't involved with Students for Life, but the pro-life issue was at the core of my personal mission. And so I was involved with college Republicans on my campus in Iowa. And so I was an intern on Mitt Romney's campaign. I was an intern for a couple of other local campaigns during the time that I was a student, and I knocked doors. That's exactly what I did. I think that in terms of when we're talking about helping pro-life candidates, that is the biggest thing that you can do for them, is to physically be boots on the ground for them. So knocking doors, gathering voter registrations on your campus, making phone calls. Those are the things that campaigns desperately need that help. And students, this is such an awesome opportunity for you. It's a great resume builder. It's a great way to really dive into the pro-life movement and learn more, because you're also really exercising those apologetic skills when you actually meet people at the door. It's an awesome opportunity. And that is the number one way I would say to do that. In general, just connecting with those campaigns on the local level, they will tell you what they need from you. And so if you're able to seek out, and, if there's not a local pro-life candidate in your area, the districts, I know in Illinois, the districts are drawn pretty weird. So you can kind of cross in and out of districts regardless of whether or not you actually live in that district. And they will take you if you're willing to volunteer. It doesn't matter if you live in their district or not. So I encourage you to seek out those opportunities. Someone told me in college once, ask people to give you the opportunity to show you that you can do well for them. And I think that with students, this is a great opportunity for you to really build your resume and really get some solid experience for the pro-life movement.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And if you're a student, obviously go to Students for Life Action and sign up right now. Duh. All right, Mary Kate. Now, you're in Illinois, which presents a lot of challenges. But I wanted you to kind of speak tonight. Why do local politics matter? Why should we as pro-lifers pay attention to it, as well as what happens in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, I think the person who said this best, we got a recording of a statewide conference call that the abortion PAC here in Illinois did about a week ago. And Terry Cosgrove is the CEO of that PAC, and he said that it only takes one election to for them to lose their pro-choice majority in the state legislature. The state legislature is really where the laws in Illinois have been blown open. And, they acknowledged on this call that we have women coming in from all over the country into Illinois to receive their abortions. Someone on the call said that they have women coming in from as far as Texas. So that means that the local level is actually, specific to Illinois, the local level is actually having an impact on women across the country. So we have to really pay close attention to those state races because we have to make sure that we're supporting those local candidates. It's easy. President Trump, we have to support him, and that is so important. And he also helps drive success for the rest of the ballot, which is something that we need. But paying close attention to those local races, they're often so close that the door knocking and the phone calls means that much more at the local level. And those are where the decisions are made that affect women, the ability for women to come into Illinois from Texas and get an abortion and have it paid for with taxpayer funding. So that's just, one example of how critical this local level is at.
Yeah, that's so important. I know with SFL Action, what we're trying to do is really focus on state legislative races, because what you said is right. Even in these very pro-choice states, in one election, they can lose their majority. They can lose their champions. And when we're thinking about creating a post-Roe world, we not only need a pro-life president, a pro-life Senate to appoint and confirm pro-life judges to the Supreme Court. We need state legislators and governors who are willing to stand up. And so we're kind of trying to hit this at all angles this election. So we're doing the federal elections as well as the state elections, because if we get Roe reversed, the decision goes back to the states, and there's 50 simultaneous battles. And I can tell you right now, the state legislatures, we would have a really hard time with a lot of states as they currently stand. And so if these state races can make you can make a huge difference with not really a lot of money, but just some time and knocking on doors and calling folks. All right, So let's get into some more questions, guys. And don't forget, if you guys have questions, you can put them in the Facebook comments below, and I'll try to get to them. So one of the questions that kind of comes up is folks who say, well, I live in a pro-choice state. I live in a very strong blue state. There's nothing for me to do. What do you say, Billy, to someone who says that?
Well, first off, you got to fight the battle everywhere. And, going back to the question of blue states, I think back to what happened in New Mexico last year, where they were preparing to pass a New York-style bill in a state completely under Democrat control. It went through the state house. Then it got to the state Senate. Something happened. Pro-lifers rushed to the state capitol, and all of a sudden, 7 to 8 state Senate Democrats voted that thing down. They were reminded of their convictions. They saw pro-lifers storm that Capitol, and they knew that there was an army out there that would have their backs. So you have to fight the battle everywhere. We all know New Mexico is the late-term abortion capital of the world. And then you think of a state like New Jersey, where Governor Chris Christie got elected there. And what did he do? He used his line item veto power to defund Planned Parenthood 4 straight years in the state budget. It's $7.5 million per year. So we have to fight everywhere. And, going back to the question of local elections too, think about abortion clinics and zoning regulations. Who determines those? It's county boards, it's city councils. And then, even if you do feel, say helpless politically in a blue state, there's no reason why you can't make phone calls into some of those battleground states.
That's a whole plan of students' life.
Exactly. And with the technology today, they match, you call into these predictive dialer programs, and they will match your area code with whoever you're calling. People don't know you're calling from out of state. That's a common practice now. And certainly with deployments as well, being able to drop into those battleground states, battleground districts. Certainly prayer is important. Everybody can pray anywhere. Donating money, if you have any money to donate into some of those more competitive races. There's especially with technology these days and the many ways you can get involved. There's something all of us can do no matter where we live in the country.
That's absolutely right. I know last fall, Students Life Action was engaged in the Virginia state legislative races, and our most active group was Wyoming Catholic College. And they would sit there at night and just do texting to all the voters through the system. So it came from a Virginia number. They made over 50,000 text messages and were actually having conversations with Virginia voters about abortion. And they were sitting there in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, and literally in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. And so you can be involved no matter where you are, and we will find if you're willing to volunteer and make calls and be a door knocker, we'll get you plugged in. Mary Kate, what do you say? And I know I'm asking you this because you live in Illinois, and I'm sure you've had to talk about this a time or two. What do you say to folks who say, "Oh, I'm Catholic, I'm pro-life, I'm a Christian, I'm pro-life," but that's not the only issue when it comes to voting?
Yep. I get this all the time. And I tell people that, first and foremost, what issue is more important than the dignity of the human person? And you can talk about immigration, you can talk about, poverty, all these other things. None of that matters if the baby isn't allowed to be born from the very beginning. And when we're talking about the vulnerable, this is the epitome of vulnerable. These children are still in the process of developing inside of the womb. And if we're not willing to defend the most vulnerable in our society, and we've said this to the legislators too, that if you're a legislator who doesn't put life at the forefront of what you're doing, I can't trust that you're going to be able to prioritize any other issue. And so I think that's the best way to really talk about that. And it's tough. We get phone calls from people who want us to talk about immigration as a pro-life issue. And it's not to say that those issues don't matter, but abortion is the most urgent issue. There are more children dying as a result of abortion in this country than any other fatality combined. So we have to look at the most urgent issue, and we have to realize that that's where our attention is being called in this moment. And then once we've dealt with abortion, by all means, let's talk about the other issues. But that is the most urgent issue.
Billy, what would you say to that when you get someone who says, yes, I'm Catholic and pro-life, I'm Christian and pro-life, but it's not the only issue. And, we really got to care for these children after they're born. And your candidate doesn't care about women or children after they're born.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard to top Mary Kate's answer. She answered it so eloquently. But look, the status quo in America, it's abortion up to birth, paid for by the taxpayers. So unless you can endorse that and own that and support that, which a lot of self-identified, even pro-choice Americans, let alone those that might claim to be pro-life, unless you can endorse and own that, you have no excuse but to put pro-life first. When you look at our international standing, we're one of just 7 countries across the entire globe to allow abortions after 20 weeks, after 5 months of pregnancy. The Washington Post fact-checked that because I think they at the Washington Post thought, oh no, there's no way that's true. And even the fact checkers admitted that we were correct when we made that assertion. And who are we standing with? We're standing with the great human rights champion country, China and North Korea. It's terrible. So unless you're willing to own that reality, you have no choice but to vote pro-life first. Mm-hmm. And without that right to life, you have no other rights. We can't debate the other rights. They don't exist.
That's right. Billy, can you think of any examples? I don't know, you're sitting there in Virginia tonight of a state that didn't vote pro-life first. And
sure.
What are the changes that you can expect in your state and in the federal level if we don't get out the pro-life vote, if we don't continue to make America pro-life?
So sitting here in Virginia, on Good Friday, obviously a very solemn day for Christians, we had our governor, Ralph Northam, who's, of course, now infamous for his vile comments on infanticide. He signed a bill that gutted all our informed consent provisions. Not a single one of the provisions. The the bill repealed all these provisions. Not a single one of the provisions prevented a woman from actually getting an abortion, but at least made sure she was offered an ultrasound and made sure she was, described certain characteristics of the child she was carrying. On Good Friday, he signed that bill into law. That was sent to him by the legislature after our legislature flipped just this past November. So that's what happens. And, to do it on Good Friday.
And they wasted 0 time. Like they did it right away in January. That was one of the first things they started pushing through.
Absolutely. And to do it on Good Friday, he knew that Christians generally, they turn off the TV, they turn off the news. It's a very solemn day. So he did it, I think, partly for cover, thinking we wouldn't notice. But it's also a slap on the face. Good Friday, And then you look at Kentucky. Kentucky's another state that had elections, statewide elections this past November. And, Kentucky's if you pull it, it's a very pro-life state. You had Governor Matt Bevin, who's an absolute pro-life champion, up for re-election. Matt Bevin in Kentucky was kind of a Donald Trump-like figure. He was an outsider, businessman, never held an elected office before. And he shook things up. He did things on, say, for the fiscal front, where he went after the teachers' unions and these unfunded pensions and liabilities and all these things. So he made some pro-life voters mad because he might have hurt their checkbook in one way or another. And so we had canvassing operations where we're reminding people of the importance and the stakes of life and how they needed to put aside those concerns because life comes first and here's what will happen if you don't. And we're seeing that reality play out. Matt Bevin just narrowly lost re-election, matter of just 1,000 votes. And the Democrat who was elected, backed by Planned Parenthood, he has on his desk right now a bill that bans infanticide, and it's expected, it's not guaranteed, we're still fighting, it's expected he's going to veto that bill. In the state of Kentucky, he's going to veto a bill that would simply require basic treatment for babies born alive after failed abortions. So there you have it, Kentucky, Virginia. These were both elections that happened just this past November, and we're seeing immediate consequences where voters put other issues first.
Mm-hmm. Mary Kate, here's a good question for you. Thinking of Illinois, Congressman Dan Lipinski, the most pro-life Democrat in Washington, D.C., just lost his primary bid. We were there on the ground. We had a team of folks door knocking, so saddened by that primary defeat. But he had been targeted for years by the abortion industry. I guess this leads to the very basic question of where have all the pro-life Democrats gone?
Isn't that the question? Let's see. I think it was 2015 or 2016. Tom Perez, the chair of the DNC, said that pro-life Democrats had no place in this country. And I think that we have seen over time that the pro-choice movement has really taken over the Democratic Party in a very profound way. Here in Illinois, you can't be a successful Democrat if you don't have the endorsement of Personal PAC, which is the abortion PAC here in the state. And they have really infiltrated to such an extent that I would argue the abortion industry in Illinois is one of the only industries that really has Mike Madigan in their pocket. Mike Madigan is really considered a powerhouse, historically and also nationally. And the abortion industry calls the shots with Mike Madigan. They tell him what's going to happen. And I think that's one of the only industries that really tells him what the business is about to be. So it's interesting how they've really taken hold of the Democratic Party in that way. But at the same time, we have Democrats in the state of Illinois who are pro-life. Obviously Dan Lipinski had a huge voting block in his district that were pro-life Democrats. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, down, all in the southernmost parts of the state, we have Democrats in the state legislature strewn all throughout. Who are supportive of our mission and our cause and are some of the more outspoken pro-life voices in the state legislature. So it is a fact that these classic blue collar Democrats who want to defend the dignity of human life exist. And we need to talk about that because it empowers other Democrats who really identify with that blue collar mentality. It empowers them to speak up for life too. We have to retake the Democratic Party. This is not what things used to be, in the 70s when this was,
I mean, I think that's so interesting because sometimes I hear that accusation waged of like the pro-lifers are too in bed with Republicans. I'm like, wait. This we know we're not a political movement. We work with Republican Party because Republican Party is a pro-life party. I would love to be able to work with the Democratic Party. In fact, I think we would see that as a victory for the pro-life movement if we get to the point where the Republicans and the Democrats are literally fighting for our votes. That means we've really won.
Right.
But there's been this strategic shift to move the Democratic Party so far left on abortion, so extreme from where they once were. But it's not the will of the pro-life movement to be aligned with Republicans on every issue. If you look at Students for Life, for example, not all of our staffers are Republican. Not all of our staffers like Republican candidates or policies, but they realize this is the place, when they're voting pro-life first, there's really a lot of races, sadly, only one person, one party you can vote for. But that's not true in all parties. If you sign up to work with Students for Life Action, especially this summer in our summer primary deployments, we're actually going to be supporting some of those pro-life Democrats that Billy mentioned in New Mexico. They have some primary fights coming up. The abortion lobbies coming after them for having, the audacity to hold true to their values. So we're going to be coming to their rescue. And in fact, in the state of Kansas, there's a they say they're pro-life Republican, but they're not. So they will have some answering to do when students start knocking on doors. So make sure you go to studentslifeaction.org, click get involved, and then click join squad or the call or door squad to sign up. And so you can help us get more pro-life Democrats elected. Billy, in like 30 seconds, can you go through the list of what will happen if Donald Trump is not reelected as president of the United States this November? What is the list we should have in our mind?
Well, so all the executive action he's taken, that'll be reversed almost immediately, if not on day one. Certainly are the hopes of eroding Roe, overturning Roe, I think go away almost instantly. We'd still have a 5-4 court with that could quickly change with vacancies. And I certainly think if, Nancy Pelosi controls the House, if we lose the Senate on top of losing the presidency, there's a real possibility the legislative filibuster could go away. And all of a sudden, instead of needing 60 votes to get anything through in the Senate, you'd only need 50. And then I think the Hyde Amendment, taxpayer funding of abortion, is in play. I think they could pass something sweeping like the so-called Women's Health Protection Act, which would virtually invalidate every single pro-life law on the books in every single state that's allowed, at least under the current, Roe and Casey framework. So the stakes are absolutely huge. I think the biggest loss would be our ability to transform the Supreme Court and the lower courts by far.
I think that's what's so interesting. Sometimes we get, accused of hyping up elections, right? We say, this is the most important election in your lifetime. No, really, this is the most important election of the pro-life movement's lifetime, really, because we are so close to reversing Roe. We have 5 pro-life Supreme Court justices. We need 6. We need 7. We need probably a courageous female pro-life justice who's willing to wrangle all those men to finally reversing Roe. So we have to win. Losing is not an option for us. And so I think that's what we really need to keep in mind. No, really, this is the most important election in your lifetime. This is not a drill. This is not a talking point to raise more money or recruit more volunteers. This is the reality of where we are. And you don't even have to believe us. Just subscribe to Planned Parenthood or NARAL's emails because they'll tell you this.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Billy, what do you think about, we were on the phone the other week talking about this. What do you think about the election now in light of COVID? Does our campaigns change? What's the voting going to be like? What do you think we need to be prepared and ready to pivot for?
Sure. So I think, in the last few election cycles, early voting has already exploded. A lot of states have created more and more flexibility. Obviously, with that comes, all sorts of issues with voter fraud, and it opens up this whole can of worms. But, the traditional political model was you put together a really strong 72-hour get out the vote campaign. Kristin, I'm sure you remember this from the 04 Bush campaign, for example.
That was my job.
Exactly. The model's completely changed. And in a lot of states, the majority of votes have been cast outside of that window. So it's incumbent that we get on the ground as early as possible. Certainly, right now, getting on the ground means making phone calls. We obviously can't go door to door, but we have to be ready for that, for going door to door. There's no substitute, as Mary Kate said at the beginning, to a door to door, an in-person conversation at someone's doorstep, especially about a very sensitive issue like this. So I think certainly the moment we can be out there knocking on doors, we need to be out there. We need to be on the ground early and reach as many voters as possible on the front end because of the prevalence of early voting. I think especially with coronavirus and the talk of a second wave perhaps coming into the fall, there's going to be an even greater interest, and there already was, in absentee balloting, in early voting, whatever prevents people from being in line with a couple hundred other people, or in a room with a couple hundred other people, perhaps for hours potentially, if on election day. So we need to get on the ground as soon as we can. Right now, we can be on the phones, we can be doing the text messaging, which you talked about, Kristin, and then we got to be ready to go door to door as soon as it's safe to do so.
Absolutely. Mary Kate, what would you say to someone, and I've heard this before, and it's usually from the jaded pro-lifers who've said, yeah, we tried that. We elected a pro-life president. We elected a pro-life Senate, and then they didn't do what they promised. Or we've heard this of, okay, say we get a pro-life Supreme Court and they reverse Roe versus Wade. Who's to say that a Democrat won't get elected and then they'll just undo it all? So why does it matter? It just keeps going back and forth.
Yeah. And, my response to that would be, we have to continue to do the work that we can do. We can't predict the future. We also can't, I can't take responsibility for the actions of other people, but I can do what I can do. And that means supporting pro-life candidates. It means speaking up for the Dan Lipinskis, who are really getting the short end of the stick with regards to the Democratic Party. It means, going out and having these conversations with people in my day-to-day life, or, door knocking, all these other things. Those are the small pieces that amount to a very big change. And I think that, Kristin, I think that what you're doing at Students for Life of America, and of course at SBA List too, is we're not just trying to change the law, we're also trying to invoke cultural change. And how do we invoke cultural change? But by having this conversation in the public square. And if we're engaging in that conversation, we might look back 40 years from now and see, wow, it felt so small when we were in it. But had we not done that footwork, we wouldn't be where we are today, in 2060. And there's no more abortion in the U.S. You know what I mean? So we have to do those little things because they amount to the big things.
Yeah, I mean, and you can also, I think, when someone raises this point, I think you just look at abortion numbers, historic abortion numbers. Look at how many abortions were committed in the United States before Roe versus Wade, and look after. The laws matter. People shape and derive their morality. Not saying this is correct, but they derive their morality from legality. And while the judges have said it's okay, I can have an abortion. The number of abortions skyrocketed after Roe versus Wade was handed down. That is a fact. So politics does matter. Yes, we have to continue to change the culture, but those things go hand in hand. You can't ignore one just because one makes you feel a little uncomfortable. You got to do both. Mary Kate, I'm going to do the last question. I have another call before my other call tonight. One last question. This is a good one that came in over Facebook. How do you get your church involved in making a difference in the campaigns and political process?
Yeah, so we had a really successful church campaign that we did this fall, that we went around to 20 different churches across the state of Illinois and taught them, here's how to have a conversation about abortion with people that you already have established relationships with. I am not kidding when I tell you that I think I learned more than I could have ever taught. And it's because the people in the churches are really the people who are experiencing both abortion and the pro-life mentality on the ground. I can't tell you how many churches I went into that I had women come up to me at the end and say, I started a Respect Life ministry at my church, and I've had 10 women approach me in the last 2 months to tell me that they're post-abortive and have had as many as 5 abortions. So I think that that's an important point for us as Christians, because we have to recognize that there are women in our church communities who have been personally affected by abortion. And that is, I think, our doorway into that conversation. Is we have to remember that we have to come at this from a compassionate and empathetic perspective, and that this is about healing. It's about inviting women into this movement. And then I think if we're able to approach it in that compassionate way, it's a lot easier to get pastors on board, to get, others on board within the church community, because they recognize that, okay, this isn't just about politics. This is actually about bringing healing to wounded women and to wounded men. We have men reach out to us too. So I think that's a good way, is to really get in there from the perspective of, we want to engage at the conversation level, and we want to bring healing to these women. I think that's huge.
That's awesome. And that's so needed, because there's so much hurt sitting there in the pews every Sunday. All right. So how does everyone who's been watching and be watching the replay, how did they get plugged in? One question we got, Billy, was, where do I go to find out where my candidates stand on the issue? Do you all have a website, SBA List?
We do, at sbalist.org. And then, Women Speak Out PAC, that's where we have our ground operation. And then, the network of family policy councils and National Right to Life affiliates at the state level, they can really get you info you need on critical state races and critical local races.
Do you also have Life on the Ballot? Is that a website?
Yes. So Life on the Ballot, that is where we're comparing, Donald Trump's outstanding, leadership on this issue with Joe Biden, which is a whole nother story. So Life on the Ballot is where we break down the presidential race, and you can see the facts for yourself.
That's awesome. Mary Kate, how do folks get in touch with you and follow what you're doing in Illinois and see how you transform the state?
Yep. So Illinois Right to Life Action is our legislative advocacy organization. So we have a Facebook page, Illinois Right to Life Action is how you find that. We also have a voter guide that you can find at voteprolifeillinois.com. So that really analyzes the whole ballot, and it'll tell you, these are, we rank all the candidates based on how pro-life they are. And then we're also super active on Instagram. So anybody who's interested in following us on Instagram, Illinois Right to Life is our account. We share a lot of, just educational tools on Instagram. And I think that's a great way for people to tap in an easy, casual, I'm just scrolling through my feed, seeing that pro-life stuff way.
That's awesome. Thank you both for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. I love to have all of your expertise, and you both are so active and involved. So thank you for what you're doing. If you're still watching and you still don't know what to do, go to studentsforlifeaction.org, click get involved, and then say join, call, or door squad. It'll take you 10 seconds. We'll get you plugged in with the Susan B. Anthony List door-to-door operations. We'll get you plugged in with some of the calling operations that are happening right now, where you can call from your home, no matter where you're at. Titus and the Students for Life Action team is having weekly trainings, and he'll sit on the phone and train you on how to do it. It's super simple. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you'll pass the word on to all your friends and family to vote pro-life first this November. Bye.